Welcome, welcome, welcome to this month's Ask the Wizards. I'm your host, Zach Smith, Vice Chancellor of Online, Virtual Vice Chancellor. And of course, with me is my co-host, Dave Young, Vice Chancellor of In-Person Wizard Academy activities. And Dave, who is our special guest this month?
It looks like Santa Claus.
Yep, there you go.
I wondered what he was doing this summer. And
I can note 2 extra lumps of coal this year.
Yeah.
just toss them on the pile, Santa. Just that's all I ever get. Kyle Caldwell is our special guest wizard this month. And man, we've known Kyle forever. Like, Kyle has been a Wizard Academy student since the early days, since Roy Williams was doing free Friday afternoons. Like, I think first Friday he used to do his free public seminar down at the office in Buda. And Kyle, you started showing up to that, right? I mean, that Magical World and everything.
We used to combine our trips with ACL Fest so we could make a big long weekend out of it, go see the shows. But yeah, it's been a long time.
And so Kyle's been a longtime student at Wizard Academy. Are you faculty? I mean, you are now because you're on Ask the Wizards. I mean,
well, I'm a media buyer. If I were to teach what I do, I'd be giving away all my secrets, and can't do that. But there's so much that goes into a great campaign.
Well,
I
know that you've been a supporter, not just a student, but a supporter of Wizard Academy all these years too. You can give your background, but I know you used to be in radio sales, so you're going to relate really well to many of our questions are from radio sales folks.
For me, it was about educating my clients as I moved through my career as a radio sales guy. That was more than 20 years. And a lot of the things that we know are really important, like frequency, sometimes can sound to a client like you're just trying to make a little extra money off of them. So you bring them here, and Wizard Academy is such a beautiful place, and it takes you out of your office and you learn these fundamentals from a third party. And then all of a sudden it makes complete sense what I've been trying to tell you. And it takes away some of that consideration bias and allows the customers to do better with the money that they spend.
So over the years, you started actually bringing your radio clients with you to Wizard Academy.
Absolutely. It was the best investment I could ever make. People would shift budgets toward more frequency and higher penetrations of the market, as we suggest they do many times with our Wizard of Ads partnership planning. And the reasons are made very clear, and you get depth of understanding about why it's important to run a sustained campaign with the right frequency that is concentrated enough to talk to part of the people all the way instead of some of the people none of the way, or a little bit of the way. So
just to kind of fill in the gaps, you left radio, you started your own agency in the Atlanta area.
Correct.
And then what has it been, 5 or 6 years? How many years now since you became one of the Wizard of Ads partners?
I've been a Wizard partner for a little over 3 years now, I think.
Okay.
And my primary role is media buying, media negotiation, design of the media plan. Each one of our clients is like a fingerprint, and so we go in and do some evaluation on the market and what the client is bringing to the table, where they are in their journey. There's a lot of different factors, but that's my primary role as a Wizard of Ads partner.
All right. Well, Zach, I think with his answers to these questions in my expert testimony, we have vetted Kyle, and he is definitely qualified to answer some of these questions for our.
Definitely.
We'll see about that, right?
Yeah.
And glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. He definitely is not getting paid for that endorsement. So that was just, fantastic. Thank you, Kyle, for saying that. Okay, you guys ready to answer some questions?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me share my screen and we'll get to the first question. Dave, Daniel, and Zach, I've noticed that I'm drawn to paintings that break the rules but make it work. For example, I'm delighted to see a compositional rule broken, but the artist did things that compensated and made it fit. It makes the painting more powerful and memorable to me. An image in the dead center or way out of balance, colors that shouldn't work together but do. This might be one reason why my polar bears aren't white. I believe one of the things that makes Leonardo da Vinci's painting of Mona Lisa so compelling is that her eyes and cheeks haven't moved to match her smile. You can't do what she is doing, so it is mesmerizing. The same principle works with writing. Copy that is the most engaging, a newsletter that compels you to read it. They break a rule, say something that you wouldn't think appropriate, but then it works out. I suppose this is describing the third gravitational body principle, but it seems to me it might be interesting to start with that rule breaking in mind. My question is, do you ever start writing with this purpose, to break a rule, and then figure out how to make it work? What is your process for writing? Any tips you are willing to share? Thanks, Jan. And that's Jan, Alaskan Raven Jan, a longtime alumni. So thank you for writing in your question, Jan.
So when it just said Jan, I thought, okay, is it? Yeah, it's that Jan because she's talking about polar bears. Of course it is.
Well, I mean, I think Jan is dead on here, and it's a great question. If you want to have some impact in your writing, you've got to pull somebody from where they are now into the story that you're wanting to tell. And so I don't know if it's a broken rule or if we're following some rules, but that's one of the first things that I thought about with Jan's question was random entry, where you have something that is completely orbiting out here without any necessary attachment, and through your writing you build that attachment from wherever it is you might enter the conversation to the point that you're trying to make. And it's something that Roy has taught many times, and it's a fun exercise to do where and we do this with 60-second ads a lot of the time, where in class Roy will ask somebody just to throw out a category. It might be plumbers, and then he'll ask another student to throw out something completely unrelated to plumbers and a sentence that has absolutely nothing to do with plumbers. And it's real magic to watch Roy connect those two things into a 60-second ad. And you realize that random entry is what makes the brain go, wait a minute, I need to pay attention to this, find out why this is bugging me. And so the brain's literally getting a communication that says, hold off on what you were just thinking about and pay attention to this.
Yeah. You know, what's even more exciting than watching Roy do it is watching the students in Magical Worlds do it.
Yeah.
After they've tried to write in the Frank style, and they've tried to write in Monet style, and then we throw random entry at them, and they're always better ads, right? Because there's that little bit of spicy random entry that just, like we describe it as, you know, if you overheard a sentence walking through an airport and it made your head snap around, what would that sentence be? And then you can use that as the first sentence of any ad for any client. I love doing that. I love random entry. And I also, Zach probably can attest to this, I love starting when I look at a problem or look at something like this and saying, okay, well, what's the worst way we could do this? Like, and that's sort of a random entry technique. Like if we were to write this ad, how would we write it in a way that would get us arrested, or, you know, have people that aren't our customers just friggin' hate us? And that's never the right answer, right? But it's a start, and it leads to something. And then you go, okay, how do we pull back from the extreme start that we made? And so I think that's kind of a fun way of doing it. And that, you know, maybe that's what Leonardo da Vinci did with Mona Lisa. Started with that smile. And I was like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? Because that's in stone, right? Or, you know, it's on the canvas. So I think there are probably good examples of that in all kinds of mediums.
So let me ask because I love random entry too, and I think it's a great technique. But just in general, do either of you gentlemen have um, tips that you would share from your writing process? Now, Dave, you kind of already started down that path by talking about you often start with what's the worst thing I could possibly do. And that kind of reminds me of, Norman Rockwell supposedly started every painting with a drunk leaning against a lamp pole. And then he would go from there. But that's just was his trigger to get his mind into what he was about to do. And so he always started the same way. So we've got your, start with, what's the worst possible thing I could write? Any other tips or processes? And every writer is going to be different. So this is always going to be unique to you. But anything else you'd want to share on that?
I'll do a couple of things that, again, I was taught at the academy, and not being a writer by nature or by trade. First thing is, I will write in my own voice. So I write like I talk, and it's not always the perfect grammar, but it comes out more like it's coming from me. The second thing is, I go back and cut 30% after I think I'm finished. So I'll literally sleep on a piece. I have an article I'm trying to get out that I want to talk about some of the slow start to the year and other things. And I'm in that process now where I let it go cold, and now I'm coming back into it, and I'm going to cut a third of it before I send it off to you guys for publication. So that's a couple of techniques I like to use.
And I think, I mean, I've seen Chris Maddock do that in class before, where you've written something, and now if you just literally take the top third and cut it right in there somewhere is the lead, right? That's the thing that you really wanted to say, but you felt like you had to say all this stuff beforehand. Let me set the scene for you. And it's like, no, we love movies that just start in the middle of an action, like 18 weeks ago. Right.
Yeah.
And so know where you're going to end, know how you're going to begin, and know what to leave out. And often the stuff that you can leave out without worrying about it is the stuff that you wrote at the very beginning to say, let me set the stage for this. So and then when you try to convert this type of writing into a campaign, that gets a little tricky, because the random entry leads to a pretty good one-off ad, but how do you make that part of a campaign? And what I like to do is, if you know what kind of the theme of your campaign is going to be, or how you're going to transition seasonally or each month, you can kind of have the main point of your ad, but then still do random entry. Right. You know where the ad's going. As long as you know how you're going to end each ad, you could random entry everything.
Yeah. And so to answer your question, at least from my perspective, Jan, as asked, I don't intentionally set out to break rules of writing or rules of grammar. I break a lot. It just happens that way, but I don't set out to. I suppose if a writer was very bored, and you, in kind of like using a random entry type tool, you randomly said, I'm going to break this rule of writing ahead of time, and then figured out how to make it work, that could be an interesting exercise. And it would certainly make the piece interesting. But as far as me personally, my style, I don't intend to break rules. I just do, just through the course of writing. Now, about my process, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody else about how I write what I write. And it's the who I'm writing to, which you should really never reveal. But I spent a good chunk of my life in the trades and construction, and I often had some apprentices I needed to train. And so the person I'm writing to, no matter what it is I'm going to be writing about or explaining, is one of my apprentices. And it's somebody that I really care about, and I want them to learn whatever it is I have to teach them on a deep level. So I'm tapping into the very patient side of myself, the very will explain things. And that's where I start, because whatever it is I'm writing about has to make sense. You have to connect one thing to the next, just like as if you were building a house. You can't start with the roof. You got to start with the foundation and then the walls that it sits on. So it has to make sense. And that's where I start. And then often through the revision process is where it will get more jazzed up and more exciting verbiage, or I'll swap out dull words for colorful ones. But that's kind of my process. That's where I start it. I take whatever I'm writing about as if I had to explain it to an apprentice so that they could then do the thing afterwards, and then through revision, jazzing it up.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, rock and roll. Thank you, Jan, for sending that question in. Next question. It's been made abundantly clear that the categories that Roy and Partners search for tend to be long purchase cycle businesses. Do you have businesses that don't have any purchase cycle at all? For example, an oil and gas production company or a construction firm. Using these two examples, they do not have anything to directly sell to the public, but I know they need the help of radio for awareness and branding. Any insight you have here in terms of how to convince these non-traditional advertisers to use radio would be appreciated. Thanks, Glenn.
Well, I think this is a great question. We often see people like Archer Daniels Midland on the Face the Nation sort of advertising on the weekends. And it's easy to think, well, gosh, what are these guys doing? Advertising on television or radio. This is a big commercial. It's got to cost a lot. The spot costs a lot. Why do they care? Sometimes I think this with some of the big insurance companies too, where you see an esoteric ad for travelers with red umbrellas coming down everywhere. Why are they spending that kind of money? And I really believe that this gets into this space where nobody knows anything about you except what you tell them, right? So all of these folks, even though maybe we don't see a purchase cycle like we would with an electrician or a garage door company or a automotive company, they do have investors. There are people that they're trying to do business with. There are people that they want to influence through the investments that they're making. Their end goal may not be sales, but it is to frame their company in some sort of, you would expect it to be positive light. So on some of these bigger brands, I think the important thing the important question that I would probably ask one of these companies or one of these media people from one of these companies is, where are you telling your story and what is your story? And why is it that you're not using this? I'm thinking of radio particularly, but this ubiquitous medium that's really quite affordable to do this work and to carry this water for you. So I think even the biggest behemoth companies have stories that they want to tell, and they want people to feel a certain way about them. So to me, I think it's perfectly good excuse to get out there and use media in much the same ways that we would for one of our shorter buying cycle companies. But the question all boils down to me is, what story are you telling? And who are you telling it to? And if you don't tell your story, somebody else is going to.
That's a great answer. My take on it comes from 20 years in small market radio, where we were literally in a town of 6,000 people. And so you had retailers, you had car dealers, you had the usual advertisers, but we had a number of people in town, including like even state agencies. This was in Nebraska. The Nebraska Oil and Gas Commission was headquartered in our little town. And you wouldn't think you would be able to sell them radio advertising because they don't have customers, right? But if you do things that get tied to other goodwill and you can associate their name with something else that's good, then you can sell them. We used to sell just loads of name mention things. I had a full-time telemarketer, and she would just sell, hey, it's National Seeing Eye Dog Appreciation Month. Would you like your, we're going to write these 30-second ads. 20 seconds of it is going to be to promote whatever the cause is. And it's even stronger if it's a local cause, right? It's Boy Scout month, and we're supporting Troop 189. And this message brought to you by the folks at whatever petroleum and the Nebraska Oil and Gas Commission. And so we did a lot of business doing that. And I would say if they're really big, it may just be that they want to talk to shareholders, but if in local radio, that's probably not the case, right? They're not going to have that big of an influence, but they've got some kind of budget for goodwill and being good corporate and economic citizens in your town. And so if you can tie into that, and if you don't have the means to put those packages together, man, make them up. Like if they're not already sponsoring a little league team, say, hey, you know what, we'll sell you 2 ads a week for 52 weeks, and you'll get a 30-second announcement encouraging little league teams and talking about your company. And by the way, we're including the price of sponsorship of a little league team. You don't have to worry about any of that. We'll take care of that. We'll, so you have to be creative, and you have to give them a reason to want to do it, right? Because they'll always come back with, we don't have customers in this town. There's nobody we need to advertise to. But they're always hiring in their town, and if they've got any conscience at all, they want to be good corporate citizens. So you tie whatever it is you're trying to sell them into a corporate, just look good, just be a company that people like and feel good about, whether you sell to the local citizens or not.
Yeah, I think both of your answers are in harmony with my thoughts on this topic. And that is, you want to talk about long purchase cycle. The people at the tops of these kinds of companies tend to be so far looking. These are the guys that spend billions just lobbying Congress for certain laws because in 150 years, it's going to open up some mining right that the company's then going to capitalize on. So they're pretty far ahead looking. So I don't think it would be a hard sell to convince them why a long-term pure branding. There is no sales activation whatsoever. So that would be the most fun, personally, campaigns to write, because it's pure branding and goodwill. And just think, hey, if you run these ads for 20 years, the next generation is just going to have a fondness in their heart for your company. And they're not going to know why. They're just going to know that they like you. And when you need your next set of employees, you need your next set of this, your next set of that, you have already seeded the field for harvesting. So,
yeah. We used to tie these to sports sponsorships as well, because high school sports on radio, it's an expensive proposition, and you can't really build enough frequency for half a dozen advertisers to really foot the bill for the whole thing. So we used to do, we called it a sportscasters club, and it was an annual membership that they paid, several $100s a month, and they got name mentions in all the games. And it just made people feel good. It's like, we couldn't broadcast these games without our club. And so everybody got a little recognition, but it wasn't quote unquote an advertising package. In many ways, it was just goodwill. And again, there are companies like you mentioned, Zach, that are huge and multinational, but every little town also has manufacturers, and they're making stuff that gets sold by retailers somewhere. It's not sold in your town, and there's no customers in your town, but they have employees and they want to be good citizens. So you figure out a way to help them shine a light on themselves by shining a light on something else that's good in your community. And I think you'll make some headway with them, and you'll probably make headway grouping them that way, right? Don't just look at one business. Try to group them together.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how Shell sponsors New Orleans Jazz Fest, and obviously a play to become a part of the New Orleans family.
Yeah.
And I think all that started up after they had some sort of a disaster down there where it wasn't the hurricane, but a play by Shell to relaunch their brand into the community
Mhm.
after there'd been
Yeah.
an issue.
Yeah, awesome examples. Glenn, hopefully that, gave you some angles to attack the problem from. But again, always update us. I know you're a regular question submitter. We would love to know how these things turn out after the fact. So feel free to write in and let us know.